What is a lesson? Now, we have a lot of these things floating around in education. We spend a lot of resources and time and energy on the creation of lessons. So it's important to take a look at exactly what we're creating. So to have a definition to work with, we're going to break the word into 3 parts and then expand each part into a full word, which gives us liability, escaping, sonar. So what is a lesson? A lesson is liability, escaping, sonar. Let's look at the impact of that. First, we have liability. A lesson has a liability built into it. It's something bad, something evil, something you don't want, and there needs to be a way in the lesson to escape that evil, to get away from it. And it's got to be exciting, it's got to be good. So the bigger you contrast how evil the liability is and how good the escape is, the more people will listen to your lesson. It has to also have a systematic nature to it, though, much like sonar. So a sonar on a ship kind of pings out from the ship and it bumps into things that are obstructions that you don't want to hit, and it comes back and it shows you that. So a lesson works very similarly. It has to function in real life. It has to be adaptable, and it has to give you a sense of what's going on around you so that you can avoid the evil and remain good. And that's the foundational concept we need to understand. A lesson allows you to avoid evil and remain good. So the underlying motive behind the whole lesson creation is built on the delusion that we begin good. And therefore, the lesson is going to help you stay away from that evil out there so that you can remain in the goodness that you already are. So how is a lesson created? The paramount place to always start to create a successful lesson is to create a liability, and this needs to be a serious evil, something that will ruin and plague the world and bring havoc on creation itself. The more dramatic the liability you create, the more people will listen to your lesson. Then you must create an escape for that liability, a way out, and it's got to be exciting. It's got to be really enthralling, particularly in contrast with the horror of that liability that you've created. Then you must build it into a system that people can use in a way that makes sense. But as you look at this, you realize that the whole lesson is your creation. You built the liability, you built the escape, and you built the system by which it all functions. So does the liability even exist? You think it does, you're convinced it does, but you created it. So how are you sure that that actually is the way things work? You're confident it is, but you created that confidence. And that's the paradox underlying a lesson. So a lesson allows you to pretend as if you're skillfully avoiding evil, but you're never quite sure. You can see consequences and effects, but you're not really sure exactly what the liability is that you're avoiding because you created it. And you're hoping your creation of liability, the escape in the system, is going to work with the world around you, but as you found, that is not the case. So why is a lesson created then? Well, first, you don't know what good or evil is, so your best option is you got to quarantine the evil. You point at certain things and go, that's evil. We shouldn't do that. If we do this, then this is going to happen, and that would be evil. So you name certain things and label them as evil, and you put them all in a quarantine. You box them in. Then you can identify what's good, because you can quantify based on what's not in the quarantine. So if you got all the evil hedged in, then what's not hedged in? That would be the good. So by quarantining the evil, then you can figure out what good is. But ultimately, you're qualifying yourself, because you're the one identifying the evil and the good. So the underlying motive here is to display that you are the true arbiter of what is good and what is evil in the world. And that is the very reason we ate the fruit in the Garden of Eden. That's the essence of sin, believing that we do know what is good and what is evil. And the lessons we create are built upon that sinful first creation. So the idea is follow the lesson, avoid the evil, and remain in the delusion that you're good. That is the essence of why we create our lessons. So who then creates a lesson? Well, first we see that you would need to be a liability prophet. You would need to be able to predict the future and the evil that's going to come down upon the earth. You need to know these things, and you need to build that liability up into something that's going to get people's attention. Then you need to understand how to create that liability in a very effective way. There are a lot of liabilities in the world around us. However, they didn't exist before human sin. So where did they all come from? They came from liability creators. We created the liabilities that fill the world around us. Now we're trying to create solutions for those liabilities, but those solutions just become liabilities themselves. Why? Because that's who we are as fallen souls. And underlying this, being prophetic about the future and having the power to create liability, you also need to be a liability authority, someone who truly knows what a liability is, can identify it, can break it all down systematically. You would need to be an authority on a liability in order to create a lesson. But as you look at this list, you realize that, well, no human being is really a liability prophet, creator, or authority. None of us are. We're all trying to be, but we're not. But there is one person who would be able to prophetically identify liabilities in the future, create liabilities in the present, and be the ultimate authority on what a liability even is. And that person is not a human, that person would be God. So only the authoritative liability prophet can create a lesson. Now this is a little disorienting at this point because we think, well, if I'm not going to create lessons, then what am I supposed to do? And your option, of course, would be to take some lessons. Not from teachers, not from books, not from friends or family, not from yourself, but from God. Why don't you stop creating lessons for a little bit and try taking some lessons for a bit.